seemed genuinely surprised when you said that the last 4 games between Penn State and Nebraska, Nebraska's won. Was that genuine surprise, and why were you surprised?
Yeah, I guess kind of, you know, I obviously grew up in the state, and I know Penn State's history and tradition and things like that, but I guess sometimes when I look at series, I'm shocked sometimes. I was surprised that, you know, that's no disrespect to Nebraska. They have an unbelievable program, an unbelievable tradition, but I was surprised that they had a winning record against us. So, you know, I'm still learning every single day about this place as well. But yeah, I was surprised that they had a winning record against us. And to be honest with you, each week as we play teams, new teams come on the schedule like Nebraska and things like that, and I learn about the history with Penn State, you know, I'm learning too.
This is the last Big Ten team that you haven't beaten. You haven't played them. Do you care about that at all when you think about your career?
Yeah, I don't focus on those things during the season, but I look at those things kind of in the off season. I look at Penn State's record against opponents, and I'd like to chip away. I'd love to be able to retire here and been able to swing some of those things at some point. There are things that I look at in the off season and kind of study from a historical perspective and those types of things that we take pride in. But during the season, no. You know, I'm focused on being 1-0. But kind of like Mike brought up, I do want to understand the big picture and teams that we've had good records against, teams that we've struggled against. You know, I'd like to be able to have a positive impact on all those things before we leave here.
Hey James, throughout the week, some guys have reminisced about, you know, DeShawn, and I'm just curious, you've been coaching him for a while now, what your favorite DeShawn story is.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if it's one specific thing. I think DeShawn's a great example to all of our players. You know, DeShawn's going to leave a legacy here in terms of work. You know, he's a guy, probably as much as any guy I've been around in my career, that has maximized his potential through work ethic, through preparation, through attitude. I mean, I think I've told you guys stories, you know, when I was a bachelor living here for 9 months by myself and sleeping in the office, and I'd come out at 6 o'clock in the morning, he'd be out on the turf running routes by himself or on the jugs machine or whatever it is. Those lonely bachelor nights that I had living in the building, you know, you see things that maybe you normally wouldn't see, and DeShawn's just a guy that's really invested. No different than I think John Reed's going to leave here with a legacy, you know, hopefully a couple of years from now, about watching film. You know, the amount of film that guy watches and studies the game. You know, it's something that we've talked a lot about, you know, part of the recruiting process, you know, is not just height, weight, and, you know, how they play on Friday nights. It's also how much do they love the game, and how willing are they to sacrifice and invest to become the best players they possibly can be. And that's gonna affect a lot of different things. That's gonna dictate how they are in school. That's gonna dictate decisions that they make Saturday night. Guys that love the game and are willing to sacrifice and invest. And I think DeShawn's a great example of one of those guys. He has worked extremely hard. I think coming in as a freshman, not being able to practice that entire year, having an injury from high school, and you know, I think it kind of set the tone for him. And some guys kind of sulk about that, you know, the red shirting or not playing, and struggle with their freshman year. Guys really struggle. I'm dealing with that right now. There's a lot of guys this time of year. It happens every year about this time. And I think DeShawn's one of these guys that instead of kind of sulking, it really kind of lit a fire in him to prepare and practice to make sure he was going to leave here, you know, with a significant career in terms of wins and in terms of production. And he's done it. You know, most productive receiver in Penn State history, and you know, Big Ten championship, you know, ring, and have a chance to have a heck of a season this year as well. So, you know, I think it's the whole package.
Throughout the recruiting process, how do you tell when a guy has that love for the game sort of thing? Is it rare? Is it hard to tell when they're 17, 16, 18 years old? I
think it's like anything else. It's asking the right questions, and it's asking enough questions, and it's also being willing to hear the information that you need to hear. Because a lot of times we ask questions, but you know, we don't want to hear it if he's a good player. We don't want to hear it. You know, it's looking at the transcript. The transcript will tell you a lot. You know, when you look at it, it's you know, asking the high school coach. It's asking coaches in the area. It's asking teachers. It's asking parents. It's watching things for multiple years on guys. it's not just watching a highlight tape on a guy, it's watching game film, because you can make a highlight film on most of the people standing here that looks good. I can find 7 plays from your high school career. I can find 7 plays that make you look damn good.
No, you couldn't.
And the difference is the length of the highlight tape, or being able to go back and also watch game tape, because the players that we're recruiting their games should be a highlight tape. It's funny because we have guys that we recruit to be offensive linemen. Their high school film, they should be dominant defensive linemen in high school. Michael Mennett, you go back and watch his tape, he was impressive on the defensive side of the ball. So my point is, there's enough things there that will tell you the story, if you're willing to look for them and if you're willing to ask. I think GPA is unbelievable. You talk about it for admissions into Penn State, and I get that, but I think it tells you a lot as a football player. We want as many guys that are really, really good students and really, really good players and are really, really good citizens, because now we can spend our time developing them as people and as players, and not babysitting and all that kind of stuff.
And when recruiting DeShawn or some of the other seniors, when did you realize that they had this love? Was it right away?
To be honest with you, we talk a lot right now that this is my first class, but it's really not. I think we have 7 guys that have been here for 5 years before. They were here a year before I got here. We got another group of guys that were committed to Penn State, and I showed up and knew them for 3 weeks before signing day. That's not really knowing those guys, and that's why those first couple of years it was so important to get to know those guys and build relationships and build trust and their families. I mean, now I'm able to pick up the phone and call their parents, or when I see their parents before the game, or I see their parents after a game, or the barbecue after the spring game. I'm able to have conversations about how they're doing, and there's a relationship there. But this class, there's still a combination of guys that were committed when I got the job, guys that were redshirt guys that have been here a year before I got here. And I think that's one of the things that we were able to do in the last 2 years is build that relationship and rapport with those guys, because it's really important, because there's going to be hard times. There's going to be hard times for the entire organization. There's going to be hard times individually. And the only way you can work through those things is having a relationship. I think that's probably more of a challenge today than ever. Is in some cases you got to be a father figure. Sometimes you got to be the first male authority figure in their life. And we're not a program that tells them what they want to hear all the time. We give them tough love. So that's challenging. That's where my psychology degree does come in. There's value there.
For those seniors who did recruit, I think you had 4 weeks on the job to try to seal the deal with a lot of the situations. Can you give me some perspective on how you went about doing that with your assistants, just trying to make sure you capitalized with limited time?
Yeah, it was a scramble. I mean, we were locked up in the Penn Stater. We lived in the Penn Stater. And going through HR and everything, half of our staff wasn't even allowed to come to Lash until they cleared all the background checks and all that kind of stuff. So legitimately, we were like sequestered, in the Penn Stater for I don't know how long. And it was basically me coming over, walking around Lash building by myself. But it was a scramble. It was calling all those kids, and that's why we kind of went to the situation where we end up recruiting a lot of guys that we already had relationships with, rather than trying to build new ones. But the positive thing is most of my staff and myself have enough relationships and connections in this footprint. Being able to recruit Marcus Allen, and I worked at the University of Maryland for 8 years and recruited PG County. That helped. I knew enough people to kind of help with those things. There was a bunch of Penn State players that I had recruited, from recruiting the state of Pennsylvania and things like that. So it worked out really well, but it's not necessarily the way it's being portrayed right now in my mind. It was a mad scramble. to be honest with you. It was more chaos than it was, you know, as clean and as organized and as the way it's being described a little bit.
Of all the guys you recruited, how is your relationship different with someone like Grant, who took a chance on you as much as the program, anything else following you from Vanderbilt to here? I mean, to have a guy that did that rather than a program.
Yeah, I think we got probably a number of guys like that, and it was a chance on us as a staff. You know, it was a chance on Penn State at a tough time in Penn State's history. You know, so yeah, I think I said that in the press conference on Tuesday. To me, it's the ultimate compliment and the ultimate, you know, sign of respect that someone can give you. You know, that they say, you know, that we believe in your program, we believe in your coaches, that you're going to continue to build on the thing that's the most important thing in their life, and that's their kid, and that's the young men saying that I feel like Penn State and its coaching staff is going to bring out the best of me, because all these guys had a bunch of options. Probably need some oil. Oil. But yeah, you know, I think that's a tremendous sign of respect, but there's no doubt, you know, guys like Grant. I mean, you think about the guys in that class, how significant they've been in our success. In our success and our turnaround. And that is, I think if one of you guys decided to kind of do a study and you look at the percentage of guys in that first class that have really had an impact here compared to most recruiting classes in a situation like that where the coach gets a job in January, you know, that's not typically how that plays out, you know, and we've been really fortunate.
When you have one of those young guys who's sulking, what can you do to kind of lift them out of that? What buttons do you try to push with them?
Yeah, I think it's one-on-one time, you know, but you know, it's funny because they go through the first wave of disappointment when they find out they're redshirting or the role is not as big as they imagined it to be. And that's usually a struggle. And then they kind of rebound from that. And then kind of late in the season, they're getting beat up, they're getting worn down, they're simulating the opponent. You know, and there comes a point where they're just like, all right, enough's enough. I want spring ball to be here so I can start competing for a job. And you know, that's kind of human nature. It takes a special guy to come out here and be self-motivated like that day after day and be driven. And then I think the other example you have is the guy who redshirted, and in his mind, that redshirt freshman year was going to be the breakout year, and that doesn't happen. And that's kind of an issue as well. And you know, it's having the time to be able to sit down with these guys and talk them through that. But they're impatient, like we all are. You know, they're redshirt freshmen, and they're not all Big Ten or all American or starters for you yet, and they're couldn't be more frustrated. I'm like, you're a redshirt freshman. You got so much time left in front of you. But as we all know, when you're young, it's hard to see any further than 6 months. You know, to be honest, it's hard for most of them to see more than 2 weeks ahead. You know, so. And I just think there's so much pressure put on through the recruiting process and from home that a lot of these guys feel like they got to make it to the NFL, and you know, there's pressure from the family that's what they have to do, and they have to do it within 3 years, and all this craziness. And we've all been doing this long enough that you look at the data, and the data says that's not realistic, but a lot of them aren't living in a world of reality. But I could say that about a lot of things about reality, the world of reality.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks.